This event is hosted by my company, David Pattinson's American Future. We're a national nonprofit focusing on career planning for young people across the country. We're doing a 12-state tour at the moment. It was always my vision, having felt that I received relatively poor career planning at university, that I would try and provide great career planning for young people, right across the US, where I've now moved to, and also in the UK, where I lived before. So I just want to go ahead now and start with the senior panel. We're going to have an young entrepreneurs panel that's going to follow this. Both panels will last about 40 minutes, and then we'll go outside for a reception afterwards. There'll be some food and drink for everyone, and you'll be able to chat with the panelists and network with them. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, well, on the senior leader panel here, I got three distinguished leaders that are all friends of mine. To my immediate left is Carl Dorville, Group Excellence. We've got Lynn O'Neill of Futures, and we've got Mike Mahaney of VIP Orbit. I'm not going to give them an extensive introduction. I'm going to tease it out of them as we speak. So I want to get right into it. Youth unemployment today is at staggeringly high levels, and a lot of people attribute this to the skills gap that exists for graduates. I want to try and get from all of you on this panel about how young people can better prepare for careers in big companies. So Carl, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us what your company does, and what made you started, and how you got into the work you're doing?
Yeah, now I'll take a quick step back and give you a little bit of background on me as well. Both my parents were born in Haiti and came to America not knowing how to speak English. And so at a very young age, they told both me and my sister that education is the foundation of opportunity and possibility in America. And that if you want to overcome racism or prejudice, be excellent. Because when you're excellent, people will stand up and take note. I was blessed to go to Garland Christian Academy from 1st to 12th grade, then went to SMU, where I got a triple major in public policy, economics, and psychology with the vision of going to law school. But ended up kind of going the business route after reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad that fundamentally changed my life and my future. And that there's a phrase in there that says the banker doesn't care what your grades are. And I found that to be very true throughout my career. And so really after that book, it challenged me to start a business. And for me, I wanted to do something that combined making money with meaning. And tutoring was able to do that. And so kind of what we do, if you've heard of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, if they tutored, they would look a lot like what we do. We get college kids and young professionals to go out and be both mentors and tutors in the classroom. And so in response to your question about what can the youth do, for me, starting a business was the route. Not being dependent on the system to give me a job or to be in charge of my future, but really to go out and try to do something on my own. And I found that entrepreneurial path is a really great one. And even if you don't become an entrepreneur, you should treat the job that you're at as they are your first client, right. First and biggest client. And I've found when people approach it that way and they approach life kind of in that entrepreneurial manner, they're able to be more successful.
And was this what came to you while you were here at SMU? You had this vision for Group Excellence?
It was, yeah. My dorm room at Cockrell McIntosh was where it all started. And then I ended up going to business school. One of my mentors highly recommended that I come here. And the business school probably refined everything that I was trying to do, but this school's been really good to me.
What about you, Lynn? What are you doing at the moment, and how did you get into your line of work?
Well, actually, I've been working for 57 years, and I'm in my 24th career. Some find that scary. It's actually been a lot of fun. And I do several things. I have a consulting company. We do strategy implementation. I also teach entrepreneurial CEOs. In a couple of different settings, and I'm just getting involved with the new Goldman Sachs initiative called 10,000 Small Businesses. So I'm doing that. In terms of answering, and by the way, I've done everything from be a flight attendant. Actually, I started out as a soda fountain person. Some of you have never seen a soda fountain, I'm betting. But I did everything from be a probation officer, to be a flight attendant, to be a vice president and corporate officer with Continental Airlines, arriving on the first day of a hostile takeover. So that was, in and of itself, was a pretty interesting time. In terms of preparation, I certainly am in favor of the entrepreneurial, and I think what you said about treat every job as though it's entrepreneurial, I think is wisdom, actually. And I'm sort of a Daniel Pink fan. Last year, I charted my income streams, and I had 8. And so what was good about that is in a recession, I always had a couple that were good and viable. And when times were great, I had 8. So I believe the most important thing is to find what makes you happy. And I don't think we talk enough about that. And that when something quits making you happy, that what you do is move to the next challenge. So that's my best advice. Life is short, and eat dessert first.
Now, Mike, something I know about you is that you built up a company and it became a big company. And now you're kind of doing the same thing again. Can you tell us a little bit about your unique career path and how you got to VIP Orbit?
Sure, thank you. First of all, my last name is pronounced Muni, like a municipal bond, a Muni bond. No offense, David. It's always mispronounced, so no problem. Like Carl, I was intending to go to law school. I graduated from the University of Illinois in Champaign with a degree in business and finance with honors. But I learned, this is 1975 era, when I graduated in 74, that being an entrepreneur requires a change of perspective often and pivoting. And I didn't, my first experience in pivoting and reorienting my thinking and energy came as a result of being unable to go to law school because I was raised in a poor family in Chicago, a blue-collar family, and I worked as a laborer in the general construction field in that era, making $7 an hour. Well, the week after I graduated from U of I, there was a concrete truck driver strike, and if any of you are from the North, you know that it's a union town, and the unions support other union strikes. It lasted a month. That month cost me the inability now to go to law school, at least for another year and a half. And during that time, after the strike was settled, a friend of mine who did work at IBM, this is the mainframe era, there was no PC industry, there was no internet. It was a mainframe industry only. Came up to me and said, have you ever thought about going into sales? And I said, no, why? And he said, well, there's an opening in our branch in downtown Chicago, and I can facilitate the introduction. Long story short, I obviously got hired by IBM, had a great career with them, and I learned a lot, and a lot of what they taught me in sales school, which lasted for 6 months, nationally graded and ranked. It was more intensive than an MBA course or series because of the competitive nature of IBM and the real world aspects of it. I mean, real world. They taught a lot of principles that I later applied then when the PC industry did emerge, and my friend and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And in fact, I had already tried it one time and it failed, having a computer disaster recovery facility, which may not mean anything to you younger people because you don't need that in much of today's world. But back then, if you only had a mainframe in a mainframe-only world, you did have to have a backup. That business failed, and we had to close the business after a year, but I was in my late 20s. A lot of lessons learned, though, so fast forward to 1985, started another company with my best friend. We created a software product in the PC industry designed for a specific segment of the market. We thought it was going to be huge. We raised $100,000 from an angel out of Boston. $85,000 later, we had to say to each other, this dog ain't going to hunt. It's dead. Fortunately, we were here in Dallas now, both of us, both transferred from Chicago. I had a mentor, and I went to him, and he suggested we have a working breakfast on July 4th, 1986. He said, don't throw in the towel yet. Have a brainstorm session, see if you two guys can come up with another idea. That morning, July 4th, 1986, a product that created and changed the world, literally, which I'll tell you in a moment, was conceived. And all we did was exchange an idea. What do we know? What do we need? What could we create? And a product that came on the market 9 months later called ACT, A-C-T with an exclamation mark, was the first product in the world to create a category that didn't exist in software back then. Contact management. We had to create the product, the idea, the name of the product, what it did, the category itself. Contact managers are designed for people who deal with people. Who of you doesn't deal with people? It literally is the product that is still on the market today, 27 years, just celebrated its 27th birthday. It's still the leader in the Windows world, and it is acknowledged as the product that created the CRM, customer relationship management industry, an annual global multi-billion-dollar industry. Act's $500 product sold over 10 million copies in the world and had more than that stolen. We sold the company. We sold the company after 6 years. It was a great ride. All of the investors walked away with about a 10 to 20 multiple, so they were all very happy. So a lot of lessons learned from that. Fast forward, I abandoned my own child in 2004. I abandoned ACT, and I went Apple. And fast forward to 2009, I was so frustrated that now as an Apple user with a device in my hand that I could have only lusted for, there wasn't anything on it that I once enjoyed as an ACT user with a laptop, which is all about people. And a dossier on people, your little black book, your on-demand instant recall, photographic memory, executive assistant. That's what I had, and that's what we brought to the world. So I started a company called VIP Orbit. I'm an angel-funded company, and we've won multiple awards, ranked number one most recently as the number one best productivity app for iPhone and iPad users of the top 50 in the world. I'm talking Evernote, Dropbox, Skype, FileMaker. So I'm at it again, and I'm even more enthused than with what I had done with ACT. I'll finish by saying I view ACT as a baseline. Part of my goal and part of my drive is to make ACT look like nothing more than a very successful experiment.
That's terrific, Mike. I want to kind of follow on from that because you've kind of taken us all through all the different deviations of your career. And, I suppose the next question I want to ask everyone is, looking at all the experiences you've had, what would you change? If you were going to put yourself into your 21-year-old self, what career advice would you give them right now based on all the great experiences you've had? Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think what's possible in 2014 wasn't as possible when the business first started, which was kind of the value of the internet as a tool to go learn. With things like Khan Academy and things like just Google, any idea that I have in general, I can go off and find it. But in terms of what I would tell myself, I've become an avid investor. I've started another company called Vicker Capital. It's an investment group. And the one thing I wish I knew then that I know now is more about stocks and that how they work and how the fundamentals work. That the financial industry is really turning on its head, where average people can have access to the information that 20 years ago only experts could have. And so I think one piece of advice that I would give myself is go learn that industry, because entrepreneurship is hard. Most people should not be entrepreneurs because they're not willing to put the work in. They are so caught up in 21. A lot of people are caught up in having this good work-life balance, and that's great. You're just not an entrepreneur. And so if you want to have that great life balance, go off, do something, go invest in an entrepreneur. And you can do that with through the stock market. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, I would tell myself you have to be willing to work incredibly hard. Great companies are built between 9 and 2 a.m. And if you're not willing to put that time in, again, that's fine. You're just not an entrepreneur.
But didn't the 21-year-old Carl Dorville know that?
He did, and he went to work. But if I had known about the financial world, and again, it probably would have changed my life, and a lot of kids wouldn't have been impacted the way they were. So that's probably why I didn't know it then. But if I knew then what I know now about the financial world and kind of how all that would work, I probably would have gone down that route. But my life would have been very different. So all in all, I'm happy with how it all worked out.
What do you say, Lynn? What does the 21-year-old Lynn need to know?
Well, first of all, I want to agree and disagree. I think every person has got some entrepreneur in them. I think every person wants to have control of their lives and how it goes and how it works. And so I also agree that it is harder work than most people could ever even conjure up. The 21-year-old Lynn would say, fail faster and cut your losses quicker. I believe that the best lessons I have ever learned have come out of the bleakest moments because, boy, you sure don't want to repeat them. The other thing is that we just try to hang on to things that are dead. And I loved what you said about letting it go. So for me, fail faster, cut your losses quicker. You can do it nicely. Don't have to hurt anybody doing that. But if it's not going to work, get yourself out of it.
Hey, Mike, entrepreneurship keeps coming up in this conversation. What about if some of the students aren't inclined towards that? Do they need to pursue it, or is it okay not to?
Oh, it's absolutely okay not to. I mean, if they don't have any instinct or spark, a fire inside of them to pursue it, then it's going to be ultimately a failure. And so the one thing that certainly marks most entrepreneurs, if in fact we could argue, I'm sure that all of us up here, all our entrepreneurs, is an exceptional, almost infinite level of passion, enthusiasm, and determination. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And if you have anything less than that, and by the way, Carl, I'd like to know what entrepreneurial journey you were on, because I would have loved a 9 to 2, because mine was like 9 in the morning till 2, not 9 a.m. But it's people say 60 hours a week. I'm an hourly worker and they want me to work 60 hours a week. As an entrepreneur, you would wish you only needed to work 60 hours a week. I mean, what it takes is your life. It really becomes your mistress. And I purposely use that word because in the sense that it's meant to be conveyed. You think about it, you're seduced by it, it strokes you, you want to stroke it, you go to sleep thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it, it consumes your very person, your everything you are, because you're it. It's up to you. And there's no other job in the world that I can think of that demands everything ultimately being up to that entrepreneur that started with an idea, a dream, and finds people to surround themselves with to help that become a reality. But the force of nature it takes rests in that individual attitude, spirit, and mind. And so that's what I would have to say. So if you don't have that, don't waste your time.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that too. This idea of, I think hard work is paramount, but this other idea of having an effective, what I like to call personal board of directors. And what I like to, these are a group of 3 to 5 people that you look to that give you your advice, who set your pace. I think this is probably a defining characteristic of success. Anybody who you find is successful has this extraordinary personal board of directors that speaks into their life. And so taking the time to actually develop that board out and not limiting that board to just people you know. So because of technology, because of, for example, for investing, I can go watch 100 hours of Warren Buffett on YouTube if I want to and learn from him. I can go read about Steve Jobs. I can go do things that weren't possible before, but I can leverage technology in order to expand my board of directors. And I think that's really important because that hasn't been possible before. But even if you don't leverage that, make sure the team that you have, your board, just like on a corporate board, has a diverse skill set. Because in them having a diverse skill set, they're going to be able to speak to different areas of your life differently than people who are all the same, if it's just your friends or just your parents. And I think that piece of advice, when you look at the story of people who were successful in history, you see that. I know for me, I look at the life of Jesus, and he had 12 people that were around him most of the time. And even in that group, he had a smaller group, Peter, James, and John, that were his really close inner circle. But in that group, there's one dude that really didn't have his back. So you got to make sure that the people that are on your board are people that should be on your board.
Well, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I just want to say that I mean, all of us as entrepreneurs work really long hours, there's no doubt. But what is being said here is, first of all, the emphasis on the hours, and I believe that's important to know. The second thing is that it's also important to have a social life, and I don't mean just connecting on Facebook or LinkedIn or on the phones. Actually having some contact and doing something that is 180 degrees from whatever your business life is huge. First of all, it feeds the creativity. So that's one piece of it. It's kind of like if I were going to suggest someone a master's degree today, I probably would suggest an MFA. It might be a double kind of elite, but the very fact is that art and music and those kinds of endeavors really grow us as humans and actually spark a lot of the entrepreneurship or the great ideas or the creativity and the innovation. So I would think about those things also.
All right. Well, I want to change track a little bit because a lot of this conversation has been about, a long-term career plan and how you can have success over the long run. And, I'm thinking if I'm one of these students sitting here, I'm saying to myself, well, that's great and everything, but what about next year? Or what about the year after? What do I do to get straight out of college onto the right career path? And a lot of you have been involved in hiring and, helping choose the right candidates. And so I want to know, what do young people need to do to stand out, and what do employers actually look for, and how did you get onto your first job? What do you say about that, Mike?
Well, first of all, I'd like to compliment each of you that did attend this session because it says something about you compared to the empty seats next to you for the students that could have also been here that chose not to be. everything that we do, not just in the pursuit of an initial job, but for the rest of our lives, especially when it is your career for the rest of your life, you're going to be sized up. I mean, you all really are sizing us up in what we're saying up here, but we're sizing you up too by the looks on your face, et cetera. And when you go out to find that job, you're going to be compared to the person that may be your biggest competitor, the person sitting next to you right now. And we have to make a choice. And so the things that you need to do to differentiate yourself and distinguish yourself from fierce competition is intensified in today's world, in my opinion. It's a greater entrepreneurial opportunity world, but that brings with it a double-edged sword, meaning that there are more people after that same position. And so your real quest, in my opinion, as an employer, and I have hired college students, is what makes you the person that I want that's different than another person that maybe even has better grades than you. You know, you've got to find out what makes that difference. There's no traffic jam on the extra mile. You got to go find it and get there.
Carl, I just wanted to go to you next, because you made a point at the beginning of this discussion about looking at everyone as your client. And do young people need to look at their employer as their client, and our employers, you're looking at them rather than as an employee, as kind of a client as well?
Yeah, I think that's the shift that's happening, because in this world that no job is guaranteed, people are realizing that personal branding, whether that's Facebook and Twitter or just your relationships, is really key. And so when you're on the interview with them, it's important that you interview them as well. At the end of the conversation, when they say, do you have any questions for us? I mean, one mark, if someone doesn't have any questions, they're probably not going to get hired, because they clearly haven't done the research. And for you to know who we are and not have any questions about it kind of comes off as odd. I really personally think that we should always try to stay in, if it's going to be, it's up to me. That should be your mentality. And so when you go into this interview, you interview them, and obviously some of the jobs you're going to get, some of the jobs you're not going to get. But your goal should be to provide them as much value as you would if they were $1 million customer for you. And then that salary that you're getting, not to view it as salary, but truly compensation for the work that you're doing. And how you move up is by providing more value than you're receiving in payment. And when you consistently show that you're willing to provide more value than you receive in payment, you're able to negotiate for higher payment, because they can see, this is what I've done. It's kind of like a lot of time people approach life as fine dining, where they want to pay after they eat. But it really is more like cafeteria life. You pay first, and then you eat. And when you have that mentality, it fundamentally changes how you approach things. But you have to be willing. I know we keep going back to it, but you have to be willing to work hard. I actually personally think the definition of success is having an opportunity to work extraordinarily hard. And anyone who's successful, it's typically not connections. It's typically not just knowing different people. It's that they had a unique opportunity to work extraordinarily hard, and they did, and that's why they are where they are.
Then what do you say? What do young people need to do to stand out?
I would have measurable results to share with anybody with whom I was interviewing. Metrics sell, and it works once you get your job too, because the fact of the matter is, if there's a freeze on headcount and you've got the metrics, the probability is significantly higher you're going to get the people. So if it were me, and no matter what the accomplishments are, I would be able to monetize them or quantify them. And the other thing I just want to say is that I would incorporate servant leadership principles in my interview and in my workplace, because that is something that is profound.
What do you mean by that, Lynn?
Well, it's actually what Carl was saying, and Mike said it too. It is about being willing. I don't know that I'm wild about the term servant, and the spirit of it I am wild about, which is being willing to help, to do the things that other people won't do. I always laugh. My card says president on one side and janitor on the other.
Yeah.
And, I can laugh about that, but the fact of the matter is that's the truth. And to be willing to do that, whether I'm in my own business or whether I'm working for someone else, I believe is a huge asset, and it makes me marketable.
Yeah, even if you look in towards your classes or your friends, I mean, you can look at your friends and say, these people are going to be successful, these people are not. And typically the reasons why you're saying that aren't just their grade in class, it's their characteristics. Does this person cheat? Are they an honorable person? Are they honest? And the values that they have, if you mimic those values, you set yourself up for success. And so I think oftentimes people underestimate that. They think the world is just a cutthroat world and everything. And don't get me wrong, competition is out there and you have to be willing to be the best. But at the same time, the people who move up in life have these values that we all relate to and that we all feel are important. And if you're working at a job where people aren't showing, the job doesn't demonstrate the values that are important to you, you should leave. I mean, life, like she said, life is too short for you to be in a place that you hate. But you'll find in life, people actually care about values oftentimes more than they do anything else. And work ethic is one of those values, but there are other ones that matter as well.
I want to, okay, so we're in a job. We're a young person. We've followed all your advice. We've got the first job. And that was kind of what happened to me after I left university. And then we had the economic collapse, and everyone was laid off from their job, and all of you are so experienced. You know what I'm talking about. You've been through career hardships, whether it's been your sort of entrepreneurial ventures that haven't worked, or you didn't get a position you wanted, or you've been laid off, or whatever. Lynn, you talked about embracing failure, and I think that's something. The reason I got into career planning, because I know. As a young person, yeah, maybe you've got a job right out of college, but what happens when you get laid off? How do you cope with these career challenges that, everyone's inevitably going to face throughout their career?
Well, I think you kind of look for the pony in them. And I always ask myself, what is the lesson from this? And honestly, there always is one. And in some ways, people say, well, that sounds corny, but it's true. And the other thing is not to give up. I know that I went through a time in my life during a recession. And one of the things that I had to say is, do I have enough money to get through today? Because if I looked out a week, it looked really bad. But if I had enough to get through the day, then I could do that, keep my spirits up, and go to work. The other thing, too, though, is to look for a plan B and make a list, I think, of the 4 or 5 things that just really light your fire. And if one collapses, go look to work in the other. You and all of us, everyone is more attractive if we're broad-based, if we have a greater understanding. So if one falls through, go after another. And by the way, there's been a lot of talk over the years about whether you take a lateral move or whether you've got to have a promotion. I am an experience gatherer, and that has worked for me every time. And I can sell that in an interview, and I bet you can too. So for me, I might be here, that might collapse, I might go here, but that is going to be something that's going to build to get me a job that's here that incorporates both of those avenues. Does that make sense? So for me, that really works. So it is looking. Whenever I have something that appears to be disappointing, I'm looking for how I can turn it into a gain. And some days that's easier than others, and it can virtually always be done.
Hey, Mike, do you think the young folks of today feel like, career challenges are going to affect them? Do you think that's something they're aware of? And, what advice do you have, whether they do or they don't?
Well, from my perspective at my age and my life's journey, and looking at you millennials out there, you have a different perspective than we baby boomers did. We had more of a long-term view of careers. When I started with IBM in that era, 400,000 global employees. Once you were in, it was lifetime guaranteed employment, and you thought of this: I'm here for the rest of my life. You probably have never thought of anything that way and are not likely to. Everything to you is a learning experience that you're going to apply somewhere else, whatever that may lead you to, right? But your mentality is much more short-term, temporal, and the things that appeal to you to be hired, if you want to hire yourself out, right? We really just rent ourselves to companies, unless you're the entrepreneur that started it. Let's be truthful here. Under what conditions do you want that you'll accept they're renting your time and energy, right? I think, the thing that I would, encourage you to think about, though, and understand at all times is, and it even came from SMU, by the way. I saw this on a Facebook post or something, I don't know, half a year ago, that said, under SMU's banner, your net worth is dependent on your network, or something to that effect. It is so tightly correlated and entwined, they're inseparable. However you define success is going to be determined today, tomorrow, your entire career by the quality of your networks. So to reinforce and validate what Lynn just said, one of the things that I don't think you understand well enough, you might think you do, but you don't, I'll just be bold enough to say that, is the essential importance of constant, regular, intensive networking. You have got to get to know people and get to know them well, because you never know how that may help you in the future. You can't dismiss it. Yes, I know you love to do this and do that, but you have to understand networking is going to make or break what you ultimately will become. So involve yourself in it as much as you can.
Hey, Carl, can you pick up right on that point that Mike just left off on? Because I think that's a great one. I mean, I've got involved in clubs and stuff, and so have you. And how important is it?
Yeah, so there's a great book, Build Your Wells Before You're Thirsty, about networking. So I highly recommend it. That he basically goes through and gives you a step-by-step analogy of how to, step-by-step examples of how to build your personal network. But that idea kind of just makes sense. Yeah, you should probably build your wells before you're thirsty. And so in answer to the kind of the first question of what do you do when you're laid off or there's a career path change, well, if you have another well,
how likely is it that a lot of these young people are going to have career challenges like that in their life?
It's almost guaranteed, in my opinion. It's almost guaranteed, and that's why I think where we differed in terms of the idea of an entrepreneur, it's if you approach your job as these guys are just my biggest client, what it also should tell you is that I should have other clients. Because if I don't have a side hustle, like I like to call it, then you're going to be in trouble. If you lose this job, you have nothing else. But if you do have other clients, then you're able to have other paths you can go down. But at the same time, if you let these other smaller clients impact the quality of work you're providing to your biggest client, that's going to be a problem too, because that's going to guarantee that you're going to lose that job. And are we recording this? Yeah. Okay, I was about to get crazy. But I won't get crazy for the recording. But maybe I'll save it. Fine, I'll do it because I'll put it out there. Because I heard somebody say this the other day, and it stuck with me so profoundly. And he said, "A job is the condom that the world uses to screw you, and none of us would be here if we all practiced safe sex." And it's true. You kind of have to have this idea of an entrepreneur of, I'm not going to be safe. I'm going to approach things differently. I'm going to have a paradigm shift that says, this is not, I don't work for you, you're actually my client. And when you approach it like that in 2014, it prepares you for when you lose a client, you're not devastated because they were a client, they weren't your job.
I think that's absolutely right. Something I get asked a lot from young people at college is they say, what should I be doing while I'm at college to sort of kickstart my career? Should I be doing internships? Should I be doing work experience while I'm at college? Mike, what did you do, during your education to give you work experience, and how did that help you or not?
Well, like I had mentioned earlier, I'm the oldest of 6 kids raised in a poor blue-collar family, the first college graduate in my family. And so my father worked, fortunately, for a general contractor, and which is why I was able to be hired at 16 through my college graduation journey as a laborer, making a lot of money. And I literally had to pay for, and did pay for about 95% of my college degree. While at college down in Champaign, I also was the manager of a Baskin-Robbins ice cream store, and I also worked in the reference library, where I was able to study, because back then it was periodicals, and all my job was simply to make sure they didn't walk away with them in their backpacks and steal them, so I could do my homework. But I had, so I didn't know what it was like to have a free day. I don't know what a Christmas break meant. I don't know what an Easter break meant. I don't know what a semester break. I don't know what a summer break meant. Throughout my entire college career, I worked because I had to pay for college. So my attitude about my education was that much more valuable to me because I earned it, and nobody could take that away from me, which also stead me well as an entrepreneur because, failure, I didn't fail. The idea failed, the energy failed, but it didn't make me a failure. But everything that we did succeed with, we earned. And so it's all about learning to earn the right to claim that your ownership of something. And so it began at an early age without my realizing it.
Lynn, what about you?
Pretty much the same story. I carried 18 hours and worked 3 jobs all the way through as an undergraduate. I was in my first manager's role when I was getting my MBA, so things had improved a little bit. But there were more books to read too, so it took more time. But I worked my way through both degrees.
What about you, Carl? When you were here at SMU, did you work at the same time?
Yeah, so we're all kind of a little crazy. So that's why it's important to understand that. Because I had 4 jobs, triple major, and I was kind of same thing. I had to because I had to pay for school, and so, but that logic, that craziness that we have, is exactly what you need to be what I'm defining as an entrepreneur, and that's why I'm saying not everybody can do that. And actually, if you're not willing to put the work in we're willing to put in, don't go down that path. Take the principles from entrepreneurship and apply those to the job that you're working at right now. Because the principles that we have of hard work ethic and just willing to see things throughout until they're successful and not being willing to fail, those principles are valuable to you no matter what. But if you want to go start your own business, you got to be a little crazy. And you have to be willing to work extraordinarily hard. And when you fail, you just feed it to your ego and use it for fuel, not let it define you.
I want to open this up to a few questions for the audience. I want to try and make this as interactive as possible. What questions do we got here for the speakers? Mike, you got a question there? You? you got a question for the speakers?
Yeah, I walked in a little bit late, so I just want to know, so you all have each founded your own company before?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Have any of you guys had any failures before?
Yes.
Mike?
I've been involved in 5 entrepreneurial ventures. The first one failed. The second one failed, but it was what caused the pivot for then what was a global, unexpected, unbelievable success that really set a different course in my life. The fourth one failed, a venture that I had with, attempted to have with Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and Muhammad Ali, which was an interesting experience. And I didn't fail, but some things that happened on their end caused it to fail. And then I'm currently involved in my 5th venture that's funded, angel funded, well underway, and a software company called VIP Orbit Software. People matter, and really with the devices we have today, it's to help you have a better network and remember things about everybody that you need to on demand in a deep way, not a superficial way, because social media today, in my opinion, gives just about everybody the impression that we know people better than we really do. It ought to be called social me, because it's really about me, and real relationships, meaningful, effective relationships, are about you, not about me.
Was there a question up there? I think that's a really, really great question. How do you overcome adversity, Carl, when you've had a setback?
Yeah, my 2 examples that immediately popped to mind. One was in undergrad. So in that time, my goal was to get a scholarship. My sophomore year, the President's Scholarship came back out, and so I was going to apply for that in order to get it, and that was my plan to pay for the last 2 years. And I failed and didn't get it. Then there was another scholarship called Invest in a Black Man, and I'm a black man. I thought I had a good chance, but a friend of mine actually won the scholarship, and it was devastating. And I thought the world was over. I was thinking I was going to have to transfer to a different school. But for me, what was helpful was my board of directors, my group of 3 to 5 people that I go to in life. That when I was in that dark hour, they came to me and saying, Carl, you're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. And so that's one of the reasons why it's critical to have those people around you, because you do have those moments of doubt, those moments when you say, hey, am I good enough? Can I really do this? But when you have that great group of people around you, they'll tell you, yes, you can, or they'll tell you, no, you're right. You're terrible at this. Do something else. And you need to have people around you that are willing to tell the truth. And so for me, that was that's exactly what happened.
And what do you say? How do you overcome adversity?
Well, I don't want to make anybody in this audience cry, but I'm going to tell you a really sad story, and I'll tell you how I got through it. I had 25 years really successful in the corporate arena. Grateful for it. It was wonderful. I had 21 years really successfully as an entrepreneur, running 2 or 3 ventures. In September of 2001, I was on my way to having my second greatest year ever when the tragedy with the towers occurred. And I always hate to say this because I didn't lose anybody I loved in that, and a lot of people did. So by comparison, my loss was smaller. It hurt, though, because I had $100,000 in business pulled in 7 days, had a lot of business with the airline industry. And I was on a recruiting assignment in San Francisco, which was just the juiciest thing I'd done in ages. And San Francisco requires tourism in order to have this business work. There was none. And normally, so I did not work another day after that in 2001. Typically, I would work 8 to 10 billable days a month. I worked 5 days the next year. You want to talk about scrambling and recreating? I did. So I went and got a certification, and I ran assisted living centers I tutored college students. I taught in the community college. I did just a little bit of everything. In retrospect, it was a great time. It was a great learning. It felt awful. I cannot tell you. I hadn't been that broke since I was in school. And it was a truly time. But that's how fast, and we've all talked about entrepreneurial ventures. And let me tell you, 7 days is what it took for that to occur. And I mean, I was sailing and then I was sunk. So
I've been there.
If I could, David, I have a quote that maybe will help you to remember. It's something that I sometimes have had to apply to myself for the very reason that you raised the question. You know, did I fail? I mean, it depends on how you define failure, because failure is also a great learning lesson, a great teacher, one of the greatest teachers, right? If you choose to learn from it. But here's a quote to remember. It's a baseball analogy. You don't have to understand baseball, but we all know what a batter is, right? Standing at the plate. Here's the quote. Every attempt does not produce a hit, and every hit does not produce a home run, but every home run is the result of both an attempt and a hit. You got to play the game. You're going to strike out. Sometimes it's only going to be a hit, but the home run opportunity is there, and that's just part of that. Get yourself back up. You're in the game. Stay in the game.
That's right. Patrice, do you have a question?
Sure. Thank you all first for all of your experience and sharing with us. I'm curious about what you do. I work for a nonprofit organization, and we're trying to empower young people. But do you see opportunities for organizations, local communities, leaders, and even universities to play a role in fostering entrepreneurship among young people or getting this kind of knowledge out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are probably the leading role. I mean, they're.
Sorry, can I just repeat the question, just make sure everyone heard? And it's question from Patrice was, what can universities do to get this kind of career information out there to their student populations?
Yeah, and I'll expand that a little bit more, not just to universities, but also to businesses and nonprofits. I think first internally approaching problems slightly differently, where you look to potentially a business to solve that problem as opposed to just trying to have everything in-house. One of the businesses I was able to recently start was My Easy HQ, where we actually do the back office support for nonprofits and young entrepreneurs, because they really didn't get into the business to do the back office. They got into it to do whatever their passion is. But there's an opportunity for them to potentially outsource that and allow us to go forward with it. I think the other thing is oftentimes organizations, the leadership in organizations, doesn't allow the rest of the team to be involved in some of the challenges that the team is having. What I mean by that is they think that they have a monopoly on, or if you let someone else on your team know about your problems and they solve it, then you're not going to look like the leader. And I think far too many organizations do that. You want to have people who are really smart on your team, who can approach problems. And by having really smart people look at your problems, you give them an opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I had a good friend of mine who's teaching in Colorado, and he came to me and wanted to get some advice about whether he should take this new career path. The district wanted to move him up for him to do, he had some great success in the classroom. They wanted to take it across the board to the district. And I told him, well, why don't you actually flip it and ask them, will they let you set up a company? And the same money they were going to pay you as in salary, will they let you do it as a company, so that if you do have success, you can branch out and do it nationwide. And they allowed him to do it, and it worked out for him. So I think that's one of the things they can do, is be open to be focused on solving the problems and not how you solve the problems, because the how is where entrepreneurs live, and that's what creates opportunities to do new things.
I just want to jump in on that too. I think SMU is a really wonderful example that I am on the associate board, and so I mentor graduate students here. And everyone I know who's involved in that program in this university encourages those graduate students to get out to actually take internships, and particularly in the not-for-profit arena, so that no matter where they're going after they receive their degree, it's really important to understand that part of the world as well. The other thing I just want to say for not-for-profits is, and I've worked with a lot of CEOs who are in transition, and one of the things that seems to me to be abundantly clear is that most people want to help you. The fact of the matter is they need to know what will be perceived by you as help. So it is really important to ask for what you need. And I think that's some of the greatest advice for not-for-profits. I think sometimes we just neglect to ask. We kind of accept a pittance. as opposed to the really big grant or the really big commitment of time or energy or money. And I think that it's really vital to have it clear, have it monetized, be able to have a metric for it, in other words, and ask for it.
Well, I just want to, I think we're kind of out of time with the senior panel, but I really want to thank Carl, Lynn, and Mike for sharing all their great insights. These guys are hugely successful people, inspiration to me, and glad to have been that they've been able to be here and inspire you with some of their stories. So big round of applause for the senior panel.
In the innovation group with the Dallas Regional Chamber, and the organization is a nonprofit regional organization trying to support economic development, primarily through supporting startups, entrepreneurship, innovation, recruiting big companies, and doing all sorts of member and business community type events. We primarily focus on the startup community. It's our background, it's our passion. And so we wanted to kind of come and carry the tune that these folks have shared and share some resources for those that actually do want to test this this environment out. So we actually got an organization off the ground that's a separate functioning organization called the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, or the DEC, DEC, about a year ago. And I'd like to have you guys check out the DEC, www.thedec.co. As a resource. It's a central resource hub for entrepreneurs. It helps about 200 entrepreneurs a year, has about 15 or 16 classes, education, mentoring, investor relations, and other sorts of programs for you guys that actually want to go and start a company. I'd also like to challenge you to take advantage of the resources you have on campus. SMU is an extremely entrepreneurial organization. The business school has great programs. If you're an undergraduate student, obviously the entrepreneurship program is very robust. But there's all kinds of other great resources. The engineering school has something called the Innovation Gymnasium. If you ever want to go and completely geek out on some really cool hardware and software, learn how to use something that you didn't think you would ever learn how to use, even for those who are not technical, go check it out. It's in the basement, I think, of the Caruth building, and it's a great resource. Greg Needle runs the program over there, and it's a really great resource, and it's just right across the street. The arts school at Meadows has a program called Arts Management and Arts Entrepreneurship. We actually, through the DEC, created a class and are teaching over there right now, and it's a startup course. It's a lean startup course. We have 5 teams of students. We've given them $5,000 each. They applied with an idea to get into the program, and we're taking them through the process of launching a business in 4 months, and we're incubating them at the DEC over the summer. It's a really great opportunity for students next year that want to apply, that have an idea, something they're passionate about, want to test whether they're an entrepreneur or not. Great way to find out when you're 21 or 22. If you fail, go get a job. If you fail, go live at home. Do something different before you maybe have a mortgage and a spouse who's going to kill you when you talk about taking out a loan or doing a second mortgage, anything like that. So check out those resources. There's a lot of great stuff out there and a lot to support you now, so you can test these things out, find out if that's a career path for you guys, and then go from there. And then Tara's going to tell you about some other programs we have as well.
Yeah, so I'm Tara Vorncall, and I also work at the Dallas Regional Chamber with Jeremy. And I'm actually pretty new to Dallas. I moved here back in September of 2012. Went to college at Bradley University in Central Illinois, Peoria. Pretty small place, but I was very interested in entrepreneurship and startups, not just for myself, but I had several friends that had ventures going on. And I was in an area that wasn't so supportive of entrepreneurship as far as lack of resources and finances and also funding. So long story short, I did work for the Economic Development Council for Central Illinois during my senior year in college. And that kind of paved the way for me to, work for non-for-profit and helping companies, kind of get connected to the resources to help them strive and survive. And I knew that Peoria and being in Illinois was going to be difficult for me to kind of get on that path. So moving to Dallas, I had no idea what a great innovation and entrepreneurial hub Dallas is. And I came here pleasantly surprised, and I have to give a silent round of applause for SMU. They do a very good job with educating students early on about entrepreneurship and kind of giving them the tools to success. And I also took SMU's Starting a Business course last fall. And that is an awesome resource for people who either don't know much about entrepreneurship and kind of just want to, see the ins and outs of it, or people who actually have a company that they're starting and they just need the extra help and tools to kind of get them to the next step. And another thing I'm passionate about is getting students and, youth connected to the entrepreneur field. And Dallas is a great city to kind of, get that going. And it's already been going on for a while now, but one event that we did have a couple months ago was our Hello event, and it was basically at the chamber we're trying to get students, local university students, plugged into the startup world and through an internship. So they can kind of see firsthand, how a startup works, how an entrepreneur kind of does their day-to-day business. So they can see it from an outsider's perspective, kind of all the hard blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. And we're looking to do that again pretty soon. It was for a summer internship. But if any of you ever, you need to know about a resource or any kind of summer internship opportunities in DFW with a startup or entrepreneur, Danielle has my information. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'd be more than happy to connect you in that level. So.
And let me add to that. I think one of the common misperceptions about entrepreneurship is that everyone is an entrepreneur that works at an entrepreneurial organization,
Right.
and that's not true. Employees work. How many employees have you had to hire? The first employee, the fifth employee, the 100th employee, and that's the other side of the internship program. You may find out very rapidly that you are not an entrepreneur, and that's a great thing, so that you can go become a great employee, and you can work for a high-growth business and have a lot of success and learn a broad set of skills very early on at an organization like that. That event has taken place already, but we do still have entrepreneurs looking for interns over the summer. I think you guys have our contact information. If you're interested in something like that, I'd love to help connect and get folks that opportunity over the summer.
Great.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you to the Dallas Chamber for coming down and making that announcement. And I forgot to mention that Carl Dorville's firm, Group Excellence, also has some great internship opportunities. So have a chat with Carl at the reception here in about 30 minutes outside. I'd like to invite our youth leaders panel, and we're going to have a discussion with them. So it's Mike and Adam Kraus and Katie Kiefer. All right, well, let me introduce these distinguished folks. Adam Kraus is a good friend of mine. He's a young entrepreneur here. He's a Dallas native. Katie Kiefer is a national media personality and also an author of a new book. And Michael Colonese is a friend of mine. He's based in Washington, D.C. and runs a national group called Work America. So, Mike, why don't I start with you? What is Work America, and how did you get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so Work America, I co-founded it about 1.5 years ago. The premise was the skills gap. We had seen that there's a lot of unemployed people out there, yet there's a lot of open jobs available. And so the goal for us was to try to figure out what the issue is. And so we did some research with schools, did some research with people that were job seekers, and found ultimately it's that there's just this big gap. And no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, Democrat, Republican, everybody agreed that this was a major issue. So as an entrepreneur, we broke off and decided we're going to figure out how to solve this issue. And so what we do is we actually work with trade schools and community colleges, develop custom curriculums on behalf of employers. But in exchange, employers actually have to guarantee to hire people out of the schools. So we're actually the first recruiting firm out there that can actually guarantee a job to an individual before they even start school. So that's pretty much where we're at now.
And Adam, tell us about the Dallas Autumn Ball Foundation, how you got into entrepreneurship.
Well, the Dallas Autumn Ball is a charity event that I founded this past year. It's a black tie event that's specifically catered towards young adults, people predominantly in their 20s and into their early 30s. And I just felt that a black tie event in Dallas needed to be specifically for that age group and very inclusive. Dallas can be a pretty exclusive city when it comes to clubs and organizations, and I felt that it was lacking an organization that was open to everybody, that would welcome different demographic groups. And in our first year, we raised about $25,000 for the Project Amplify Education Initiative. And I saw an opportunity where people would be enticed to come to an affordable black tie event that's geared towards your peers in your 20s and early 30s. And luckily for us, we had a sold-out year in our first ever year.
That's terrific. And then Katie, entrepreneurship, how did you get into it?
Well, I started out as an entrepreneur when I was a young girl, just starting many different companies, from lemonade stands to face painting booths. And so I always had that love for entrepreneurship. And then when I went to college, I started a nonprofit student newspaper there that gained national attention. And then I worked in commercial real estate for several years. So I worked in a very large company and gained good experience. And just realized that writing was really my passion that whole time. And so I left real estate and built up my writing portfolio. And a couple years later, Random House reached out to me and said, we've been reading your stuff online. We really love it. Would you want to write a book? And so now I'm writing a book. It's called Let Me Be Clear, and it's coming out this summer, and it's all about the millennial generation, actually. So I was able to find my passion, but it was always there to begin with. So I think you kind of know if you're an entrepreneur.
What was your major in college, Katie?
My major was philosophy, which helps me analytically. It helps me argue and it helps me write. So originally I was thinking of going into law school, but I really think that your major can be anything.
And so the major that you did is helping you now, but kind of by accident. Is that what you say?
I think as long as you get a broad-based education, you can apply that to anything. And just looking at what kind of students medical schools take, they'll take students who major in philosophy as well as students who major in chemistry. So I think that just getting a broad-based education is very important.
Mike, what was your major, and what has it got to do with Work America?
Yeah, my major was finance and accounting. It helped me really in my first job, which took me a while to find. But other than that, in terms of entrepreneurship, it really and truly has not really led to much learning, to say. It was all on the job, kind of having everything thrown at you at once, trying to figure things out, and that's how I learned entrepreneurship.
Do you regret doing your degree? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say regret it. It was something that, growing up in, a standard American teenager, that's something that you do. I wouldn't say it was the biggest help, but it doesn't matter if it's a 4-year, 2-year degree, trade skills. Anybody can be an entrepreneur if you really have the passion for it.
Adam, what did you do at university?
So I went to Boston University and I studied business management. Pretty broad degree. I did not know what I wanted to do. I was a hockey player at Boston University, and that was my main focus. I was really excited I was able to get into a school like BU because of my hockey and as well, my academics in high school. So I think that it taught me skills that have prepared me for getting started in the workforce and so on.
Well, Adam, I mean, something you're not telling everyone is that you also have a second job, don't you? You work for Coca-Cola.
Right, well,
this is what's so interesting about you.
Working for Coca-Cola is my main job. So to be considered an entrepreneur is quite the compliment for me, surrounded by all of these true entrepreneurs who have dedicated their lives to solving problems, starting companies. So I work for Coca-Cola, the epitome of the corporate world, and in my spare time, because I don't believe that I have enough time, I have founded this nonprofit charity event just so I'm not going crazy when I'm not at work.
Well, this is something I've learned in my life. It's a lot of people say, what should I do? Should I go for a corporate job or should I go for an entrepreneur job? And it's tough to do both. And that's what's so interesting about you, because you manage both. And what I want to know is, how do you get Coca-Cola to sort of allow you to invest time on the side to do this? And how did all this come about when you've actually got a full-time job? I mean, you could just leave work at 6 o'clock and take it easy.
Right. Well, I think the real goal of We the Summit is try to prepare college students or people just out of college for getting hired, getting a job. And when I first got out of school, I tried to play hockey professionally and wasn't good enough. And fortunately for me, just the years of being a competitive person provided me with the mentality that once I begin the next chapter, post-athletics, that I will be determined, I will be working harder than any of my competitors out there to get the job that I want. And I graduated in 2011. The job market, especially for young graduates, was pretty difficult, much like it still is today. And it took me about a year after graduating before I started working at Coca-Cola. And so in the meantime, I took a job at a clothing store, and I would teach hockey lessons in my spare time and just try to prepare myself by reading or watching very impressive and inspirational people on YouTube, just to set myself up for these interviews that I would be going into to try to get that job.
And what do you say about that, Katie? Because I mean, you were kind of in real estate when you left university. Now you're an author. I mean, how do you make that change?
Well, I guess I don't see it as much of a transition as it sounds like, just because I had started writing when I was in high school. It was more of realizing, oh my goodness, this is my passion. I need to go back to it. But when you're in college, I think it's a good idea to try new things. And sometimes you won't realize what you are passionate about until you try it. And it's good to get a broad range of skills. So I'm a much better writer having had real world business experience. I can talk about the economy. I can talk about business and entrepreneurship much better than if I had just gone straight into working for a news bureau. So just don't ever consider any opportunity a wasted experience.
Okay. And do you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, so I'd say I actually have a personal story with that one. It goes with Work America, actually. When I graduated in 2009, finance accounting major, I always wanted to go work on Wall Street. And at that time, everyone was getting laid off. It was the worst time for the financial markets. And absolutely nobody could find a job. My little brother actually graduated, or he's graduating this May, and just had his interviews up on Wall Street too, and is now deciding he thinks he wants to come down to DC and work in an entrepreneurial world. But what it is I graduated May 2009, didn't find my first job until February of 2010. And in the meantime, I taught tennis. I took off to South America for a couple months, backpacked around. But it took me a little while before I really decided, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be.
All right. Well, let's take a step back here and look at the bigger picture for millennials, because you guys have talked about your individual experiences. What do you think about the state of the job market and the career market for young people out in America, and what advice have you got for the SMU students here?
I still think that it's really difficult out there because what college graduates are facing, they're facing a market where people have been laid off that already have years of work experience, and they're taking jobs that are below what their pay level or expertise level was, just so that they could be working and paying the bills. So millennials are having to compete against people who have years of experience ahead of them. And so what's important for millennials to remember is that you are your own brand. And when you're getting in front of people looking for jobs or trying to start your own company, you have to have your brand as a person developed and really sell your potential employer or investor on your own personal brand.
And what about, Mike, what about you? What about this situation for young people in America as far as career development goes?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of building your social network. I like to say a lot of things that happened with me. After my job, I spent 2 years in Atlanta working at a software company. Took a job as a COO of a lobbying firm up in DC before I broke off and started my own company. It was building my network, and I like to say it was luck that happened. Kept falling into the right place at the right time. But honestly, it's because I kept putting myself out there until something finally worked out. So it's showing up to events like these. It's talking to people. Be the person afterwards that goes up and talks to the entrepreneurs that have done it before. Just keep talking to people.
Okay, so you get involved in media commentary and you study the political arena. I mean, what do you think about the situation for young people out there in America right now, career-wise?
Well, the unemployment rate for young people is 16.2%, and I got that statistic from Generation Opportunity, which is a great organization that you should check out, by the way. But I have spent over 2 years researching the millennial generation and whatnot. I put some very specific advice actually in my book, but with regard to the situation out there. I think we all know it's not good, but I think there are some things that young people can do. And you're lucky, actually, that you go to school in Texas. Here, if you want to become an entrepreneur, there's zero personal income tax. There's a good culture. This is sort of the buck the trend culture. It's not New York, it's not DC. If you want to be an entrepreneur, this is a good place to be. And I guess my microphone is not working the best. But, and one thing I just would like to share, that some skills that employers are looking for are writing. If you can do anything to improve your writing skills and develop professional writing skills, that is very highly needed out there.
Well, what about if people want to write their own book, like you, Katie? What would you tell them?
I mean, I think you have to naturally have a desire to be writing books, but I'm just trying to share some broad. If you want to write a book, I would say start blogging, try to get your articles out there, do things like that. But you could talk to me afterwards. I could give you more specific advice. But there are some things that everyone is looking for, and that is an analytical skills. So if you can develop those skills as well, that's very good. And then technology, integrity, and work ethics. So some of those are character traits, some of those are skills. But if you can develop those things right now when you're in school, I think that you'll have an upper edge.
Adam, what would you change about your college experience, going back to that? Look, we're just based on the sort of the few years of experience you've had since you left.
Right. Probably not try to chase so many girls as a hockey player and focus more on academics. But honestly, really try to develop your own personal skill sets, because if you're not going to be an entrepreneur and you're looking to work for a company and you have this idea of a dream job, just remember that a lot of skills can be taught, but there are certain things that can't be taught. You can't be taught work ethic, and you can't be taught determination. And so if you just practice being determined, practice going through the motions, then that will set you up for whatever opportunities lie in front of you, because there really are two things that hold people back, and that's fear and inertia. The fear of failure, the fear of not being the smartest person in the room. I know for a fact I am not the smartest person in the room, but I'm very comfortable with the skills that I do possess, and I try not to outsmart people who I know are already smarter than I am. So just have a sense of who you are and the dynamics that you're able to bring to the table. And that second hindrance of inertia, just get started. Start reading that book. Start going to that class that you haven't been to lately. Those are some things I would definitely advise.
Is that true, Mike? Is that the way to look at post college?
Yeah, I would say in college, for looking for a job, most of the jobs that I actually posted, they actually don't hit the market until they've already been try to be filled internally. So it's really about trying to get out there. Finding a job right now, it's unfortunate, but things like GPA matter a lot because school doesn't lead to a job. It actually just leads to a set of skills that will hopefully lead to a job. So what you guys really need to do is really focus on things like having good GPA, getting out there, connecting to the business world. If you want to be an entrepreneur, go intern at an entrepreneur, for an entrepreneur. Everyone's always looking for new people, free people to hire. But really and truly, like whatever it is that you're interested in, try to get an internship while you're in college and get that experience and try to get in there and make some face time.
Katie, what about your college experience looking back? What would you like change? Now you've had some experience post-college.
It was a really great experience. I think sometimes I burnt myself out pushing myself too hard. So it is important to not be too hard on yourself. And, sometimes it can be, you can get anxious as you're reaching senior year, like, I don't have a job yet. What's going to happen? And I think if you approach every day as I'm going to do my best this day, and as long as you've done your best, things will happen and things will start to fall into place. So just look at each day that way and you'll become successful.
All right. Well, I want to talk to you guys about the future because I'm always about the future and the American future. And so, Adam, you've got the corporate job and you got your entrepreneurial gig. I mean, which do you like the best, and where's all this going to take you?
I love working for Coca-Cola. They pay the bills. But personally, my passion is definitely with my charity because it is something that I founded on my own. I had a vision for, and I saw it not only come to fruition, but be a home run in our first year so that we can move forward and be bigger and better for the future. But what's really important is we've kind of talked about networking and setting yourself up for the future. When you're meeting with people, if you have a specific field that you're looking at going into, definitely try to make contacts within that field. Go grab a coffee or a lunch with somebody who may be of importance in that field or who may know some people. And when you meet with them, don't explicitly ask for a job. Ask for 3 contacts that they could pass on to you. And so then you go and you contact those 3 people and you meet with them. And you slowly build up your network within the field that you have your eye on, because eventually you'll be getting to a point where you'll be having someone recommending you for a job so that when you're going in and interviewing, you're not just going to be some piece of paper that's showing up or a piece of paper that you've submitted online for a position, because most of the time the applicants that they are taking are from people who have been recommended by someone for that position. Hey, you need to take a look at this person. And when you have built up that network, you'll start having people making recommendations on your behalf.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're kind of getting into momentum and how important momentum is. And I certainly think that is true. Certainly in my business, I feel that. Katie, what about your future, based on your book and your political work, your media work? Where do you see it all going?
I definitely want to write more books and continue to speak to young people and inspire them. And also I'm working on a cosmetics company for women to empower women to go out there and become independent entrepreneurs themselves. And I've trademarked the name. And once I'm done with this book thing, I hope to spend more time on that and then donate a portion of all the proceeds to women that are starting their own companies. So that's the next thing on the horizon.
Mike, what's going on next for you based on all your experiences so far?
Yeah, right now it's the focus is education. With Work America, we're working on trade skills and eventually hope to get to 2-year and 4-year degrees. But the goal is to anybody who goes to higher education, no matter what it is, that you have a job waiting for you at the end of it. There should be no excuse why somebody should graduate from SMU and not have a job waiting for them. And that's what we're trying to do, is get employers to start realizing that if they put a little bit in the beginning, do some pre-screening, let you know exactly what they're looking for, and actually help build the curriculums, that everybody who goes through school should have a job waiting for them at the end. So right now it's focused on the short-term diplomas with community colleges, technical schools, and then we'll work our way up.
I just want to open it up to the audience for a couple of questions here right at the end. We got any questions up there for some of the young entrepreneurs? Pete, you got a question? Adam, what would you do differently apart from not chase girls?
Right. Probably focus more on finance. That would be something that I would change. But I don't think that you can. I don't think that you should look back on what you can change. I think that you should look towards your future on what you can start doing better. And so what I'm doing now is I'm taking some finance courses in my spare time so that I can start learning that skill set and be more knowledgeable in that. So I try not to look back on what I could change. I like to look back and see how I failed, why I failed, and what I'm going to do differently moving forward.
Let me just restructure that question in terms of your weaknesses. I mean, we've all got weaknesses and we've all got strengths. Should we focus on improving our weaknesses, or should we just say, hey, let's not worry about those. Let's just focus on our strengths and let them carry us forward? Mike?
There's a lot of people say focus on your strengths and ignore your weaknesses. I can't do that. I have to focus on everything. So try to really work on strengths and the weaknesses. I know if I could go back in college and redo something, it would actually show up to class and complete assignments and actually work on the GPA, because unfortunately, like I said earlier, that really matters in college and to find that first job. So.
KT, I want to ask you a question about being a young female entrepreneur, and what advice do you have for young women that want to pursue business in the way you have?
I think to always just present yourself as a professional. Sometimes people underestimate women or come to think that you have they just look at you differently, but they'll immediately change that perception if you always carry yourself as a professional, and you obviously you just have to be. You have to change that sometimes.
Change people's perceptions of you.
Yes, I mean, I would travel across the country, and I would be leading the meeting sometimes, and no one would look at me. They would look at the guy, and I was like, okay, I'm the one leading this meeting here. Or we would have.
How did you overcome that, Katie?
Well, you just ignore it, and you just continue on, and you just keep acting professional, and it ends up working out in the long run, because, I mean, I was able to keep progressing, but I think you just can't let that bother you. Lots of times when you're in a small group meeting, if there's a guy talking and there's other guys, they'll only look at the guys, and that always bothers me. I don't know why that happens, but it happens a lot. And you can't let it bother you, and you just have to speak up and raise your voice when you have something to say. I think if you let it bother you, it holds you back. Yeah.
I agree with that. Janie, you got a question?
So whenever you start a company, it's expensive, and you have all these legal fees. So when do you decide that your company is worth copywriting, trademarking, fill in the blank?
When's your company worth trademarking or copywriting and actually investing in?
Yeah, we actually did. So my co-founder and I met in November 2012. And we spent maybe 2 months doing research, 3 months, then we raised a seed round. And it was at that point when we were going to raise the money, when we knew this was a viable business. This is a service that's needed. We had community colleges say yes. We had advisors say yes. We had investors say that they'd do it. So we said, okay, that's the time to do it. So we raised a series round, and this past year we just raised a Series A.
KT, when did you feel the time was right to invest in your book, the time and the resources?
Well, my book is an investment that Random House is making in me. So they read my columns for about a year, and then they reached out and said, we really like your writing style, would you write a book? But with my cosmetics company, for example, that is something that you develop a business plan and you show it to as many people as you possibly can, particularly who are in that industry. And I think try to, like a former speaker was saying, get a board of directors around who can help you, particularly entrepreneurs themselves who've been through that process themselves. You show them your business plan, and they'll be so helpful to you in saying you should move forward, or maybe you should do a little more research.
Adam, when did you know that your Dallas Autumn Ball was the thing to invest in?
Right.
Because you've got to take the plunge at some point.
Right. And I think that my venture is a little more altruistic than Mike and Katie's, because I'm not looking to trademark my event. I would love for it to spread to cities throughout the country, because the whole point of our existence is just to broaden the base of young adults to become engaged and passionate and empowered in their communities. And I just believe that there was a need for an event like that, and I just started reaching out to my network, people who I thought may be supportive of this. And luckily for us, what we were raising money and awareness for was an initiative that many people could get behind. Project Amplify is an in-school tutoring and mentoring program that's helping the most at-risk struggling students at the most at-need public schools in South and West Dallas. Who wouldn't want to help those kids out? So luckily for us, we had a good approach to take that was very appealing for people to want to get behind.
All right, any more time for a final question? Katie, 2 or 3 biggest things you learned writing your book?
I guess that I had more energy than I thought. And I think this goes back to, is it Carl? He was talking about how much energy you have to have when you are passionate about something. Writing really is my passion. And I was working almost around the clock. I'd sleep maybe 5 hours, but the rest of that was researching or writing for 7 months straight. And the only way you can do something like that is if you're 100% passionate and love what you're doing, which it sounds like you do. And when you find that, then your work isn't work anymore. You can just do it whenever. You're constantly thinking about it, and it doesn't feel like work. So that's one thing I learned. And then also, I guess the rest of the research is in the book, but I did learn that all of the contacts that I had been building up, the importance of networking, because all of the contacts that I've been building up in my life since high school, I've gone back to all of them, not all of them, but key people, of course, like Marines, attorneys, doctors, for particular chapters. And I've said, can you look at this? Can you advise me on this? So it is important when you're working on any venture to have professionals that you can go to who are experts, and that was valuable, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you, Katie, and thanks to all the young entrepreneurs on this panel. That's going to be a wrap for the We the Future Careers Summit here at SMU. Want to let everyone know we're going to be heading outside. We've got a few drinks and a bit of food for everyone and a chance to chat with the speakers. I want to thank you all for attending. We're running a national tour here, like I said. I hope you'll all follow our tour around the US online. And we also plan to come back here to SMU and hold more of these events here. So if you're interested in getting involved with us, please follow us or get in touch with us on our website. We're also interested in hiring interns as well, as I'm sure a lot of these speakers up here on stage are as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to them. I see Marva Ames from the careers department here, and she's a great resource for jobs. So thanks everyone for coming, and round of applause for our young entrepreneurs panel. Thanks very much.